Now, I've covered the Rattlesnake many times in the past, and it seems like every time I return to this ship, the Rattlesnake just becomes better and better. So it will be time to find out how will the Rattlesnake perform with the new Aerospace tag, the Implant, and it will be time to see how will the Rattlesnake perform in the Wormhole space, or should I say, how will the Rattlesnake perform in the Cobalt Edge systems. Now I have 4728.37 DPS. This is the older build that I've used on this ship, and honestly, the DPS on the Rattlesnake feels like it's been going up and up with every new update. Well, not exactly every new update, but it does feel like the Rattlesnake's becoming more lethal by every passing month. So I'm using the rapid missiles in the high slots, which are the secondary weapons on the ship, since 80% of the damage on Gurista ships comes from the drones, and the drone should be your primary weapon system on any Gurista pirate ship. Now I have offense ogres, and they do some pretty hefty DPS. Ogres have basically the highest DPS output. They do thermal, but your missiles do omni damage, and so you can see that I have quad drone damage and fires. The rigs are also fairly cheap. The drone bursts are others, and I have some capacitor rigs in the engineering rigs. So overall, this is the default PvE build for the Rattlesnake. Now let me show you the Implant. So the Aerospace tech, the Implant, is definitely taking off with how much DPS you can get out of it, and I will be doing the test with Super Capitals in the upcoming days, because I've seen some very ridiculous numbers that I want to check myself. Now as for the general units, I'll just place the ordinary stuff that I use. Now players ask me what's basically the cheapest, or should I say the most priced performance level for the Implant. I usually say 15 to 30, and the same thing can be applied to the Aerospace tag, the Implant as well. Now as for the general units, well, I'll just slap the drone units, also enhance the shield booster performance of the Rattlesnake, since the ship does have some pretty good stats on the shield by default. After all, we have a 20% bonus on shield resistance if your skill level is level 5. And I did gain an extra 100 DPS while also enhancing everything else on the ship, which is pretty good. Nearly 5000 gold DPS on the Rattlesnake with the offense ogres. I'm fairly sure if I had sentries that DPS could have been higher, because I believe sentries have higher DPS than the ordinary large drones, and if you have a nanocore, then your DPS is going to be much better than what I'm showing you here. So let's take a look at the active stats. Now the DPS, as we already seen, is pretty solid. I mean, almost 5000 cold DPS on the Rattlesnake is fantastic. 341,000 hit points is the defense. Now the tank, the tank is solid. It has a little hole on EM, which can be solved quite easily. But for a ship that's built for DPS, that's pretty good. Really good stats. Capacitor is stable, and the speed. Now the speed output on the Rattlesnake, it's not the worst. The Balgorn is known to be the slowest, although the Rattlesnake is definitely not fast. So this is probably the second slowest faction battleship in the game. Although speed is not really a big problem, since you have a very, very hefty tank on this thing, so tank is the way to go. You can fit an afterburner on micro overdrive if you like, although it's not really necessary. I guess if you are using the ship as a sniper, it might be a good idea to have the Rattlesnake builds to be used with a micro overdrive or an afterburner, but if you plan to tank, then I guess you don't really have to have any propulsion module, because they only just use capacitor. And speaking of capacitor, the Rattlesnake has a pretty solid capacitor, does last a very long time. With one booster you can keep the capacitor uneven without using an oscillator capacitor battery. It is capacitor stable with only one shield booster, which is honestly pretty awesome. Let me just quickly disable this little icon. I was wondering what was What was I missing? And there we go. Alright. So, let's see the maximum DPS. 5.6 thousand. With the second damage mod, it is 6.5 thousand. Okay, with the third damage mod, the DPS is 7.2 thousand. And with the last one, we have 7,545.66 DPS for high sec islands, and for deep null sec anomalies. This is pretty solid. And if you have an nanocore with some levels, and if you have a pretty good nanocore that enhances DPS, you might even get about 10,000 DPS with this current build, with this current layout, and with my current rigs, modules, implants, and everything else. So, pretty solid DPS. I like it. A significant increase, that's for sure, although the bomber tactic will still have higher alpha damage, and it will still have the total higher DPS, but it's not going to last nearly as long as the aerospace tactic will last. So sustained DPS is the key word, or the key aspect of the aerospace tactic implant. The bomber tactic can be ridiculously strong in PvP when you have a bunch of these ships just deleting stuff, because that's just what the bomber tactic implant does. 20, I think, like 17,000 DPS or 20,000 DPS with the bomber tactic with the same build, because it does give you an extra 300% DPS on the drones once activated. So that's a pretty strong PvP implant. This one is good for both PvP and PvE. Now, I was talking about using this ship in Cobalt Edge, so how would a Wormhole Rattlesnake look like? Now, I would say in order to have the Rattlesnake work in very dangerous territory, in unknown territory like the Wormhole space, it first needs to have more medium slots. That's the most important thing, or if not, then you will have to basically use an alt to scout ahead, since 3 medium slots are really not that much. You need at least 4 in order to make everything work, basically, if you want this ship to be completely solo. If not, if you don't plan to run this ship completely solo, then I would recommend to have an alt or a friend that is going to do the scanning aspect, since the scanning part is going to be much more difficult with 3 medium slots. Now, I did put one integration for tank, since Cobalt Edge is quite dangerous, and you need to have very good tank if you want to go there. The drones, although nerfed, they're still dangerous, and I don't really know what to expect with the Rattlesnake. I know how it will perform. I know the Nestor was really good because it was fast, and the Nestor is a bit different from the Rattlesnake. With the Rattlesnake, you only have large drones. You can use medium and small ones, but their performance will be horrible because you don't have any bonuses on them. So you have to build the ship in such a way that small fast targets are not going to be a problem. Now, this ship here is going to be equipped with dual boosters, because I know that the Cobalt Edge drones are dangerous, and having a good tank is nice, but second booster I think is going to help a lot, because even if you have a good tank, they still will do some good damage to you, and I'm not really sure how much resistance I'll get with the build that I imagine, although it already has good default DPS. If you want extra DPS, you can keep using the Amphars, but if you want more tank, then you can easily replace those Amphars with extra adaptive. And if the drone speed is a problem, then those supervision computers that increase the drone speed are a very good idea to have, and I think I'll equip that on this ship, since I know some of the Cobalt Edge ships or the drones are very fast. So the main problem with this ship is drone speed, and if you have the bomber tactic implant, it's not that much of a problem. But if you don't have that, well, you have to use some of the other modules to enhance the speed of the drones. And it still has some pretty good DPS, comparable to the DPS output of the Nestor, although it is known that the Nestor has the best drone DPS out of any battleship in the game. But at the same time, the Nestor also costs like 5 Rattlesnakes, so with extra DPS, with extra speed, you also have to pay a bit more ISK for the ship, and it's a very rare ship.
Docking request
While
accepted.
being very suitable for unknown space exploration, it's a very juicy target. So you have to be careful with what you're doing with the ship. Now as for the rigs here, I think I'll keep the one integration for tank, although maybe it's actually a smarter idea to have two rigs specialized for tank and only one rig for DPS. I mean, that combination should also work really well. I guess it really depends on player experience and overall skills you have. If you do go with two tank rigs, then you can do more with the low slots of the ship, enhance the tank even more, or basically enhance the DPS or drone speed. So you have a lot of flexibility with the Rattlesnake. It has like 7 low slots, so you have a lot of different options to fit here. And in my case, I'll just do something like this: one damage mod and this supervision computer that will enhance the drone speed. So I think I should be good to go with a build like this. Now, before I undock, let me go and let me just add a bunch of modules to the cargo hold in case I have to swap the build. In case this build fails, we'll just go and have a bunch of other modules installed in the... I'll just carry them around with the ship. Now, the scanners. Well, I'll come to the scanners once I put in some of the adaptives in the cargo hold of the ship, since I have to carry that through the wormhole. Now the analyzers. Since you're limited to 3 slots in the medium slots on the ship, you will have to sacrifice 2 modules for a blue and red scanner. Now, the red scanner is going to be used just to scan around to see if there are other player structures or if there are other players around, although you will be limited with the scanner. You are not going to be able to find smaller ships. Small ships will be invisible to your scanner, which can be problematic, since small ships are usually the highest threat to the Rattlesnake. Although, depending on your build, it might not be the highest threat, but smaller ships are usually the main reason why Rattlesnakes blow up, since most don't have enough drone velocity, drone speed to catch them. The blue scanner will be your primary way in and way out, basically, since you are not going to go through the big wormholes with the Rattlesnake. That is a death sentence, because they're usually camped. With the Rattlesnake, you can easily just go through the small wormholes, since the small wormholes allow the passage of battleships, and small wormholes are usually not camped, and they're also all over the game, so the chance that you encounter a player while passing through a small wormhole are much less than through a big one, since the big ones are also visible on the overview. And that's one of the main differences between the large and small wormhole. The small ones are just way safer, and there's just not much problem passing through. You might encounter some players, but very rarely, since most of the camped ones are in the large ones. And well, we are in Cold Edge now. So let's see how this ship will perform. Now, we already have seen the Aerospace stack, the Implant work, and honestly, I like the Implant, the way how it gives you passive DPS boost. Now, the active mode is usually good for snipers, for long range ships. The Rattlesnake can take advantage of them if you have sentries, but I usually like to use the active mode of the Implant when I'm piloting a carrier, or when I go and pilot super carriers, since they reduce a lot of speed. Now, if you have sentries, it's not going to be a big problem, since, you know, sentries are not very fast by default. And when I say not very fast, they are stationary, so they will have no issue with that speed reduction. I mean, you reduce to 0, it's still 0, so it doesn't really matter for sentry drones, but you will reduce the speed of the other drones, or the large ones, even more if you have the implant active. Now, it has some benefits, as I mentioned before. It has some benefits of using it, using the implant in its active mode, but for battleships, for cruisers and frigates, I usually don't use the active mode of the implant, since you need that extra drone speed against certain targets. And of course, when I say certain targets, small targets, large targets, medium-sized targets, they all can be faster than your drones if you have the active mode of the implant engaged. So definitely not something I would recommend to actively use with ships that use drones or fighters that have very short range. The implant does enhance your range, but in all of cases, that extra range is still not going to compensate enough for the lower tracking, and you might find occasions where the implant is active, but your drone simply don't have enough speed and tracking to hit the target, and that can happen with any size target, since if they're faster than your drones, you might have problems. So when piloting these ships, I recommend that you don't use the active mode on the implant. The DPS is passive, and basically the DPS increase is all that you will need in most cases. Now, with sentries, you can use the active mode easily, since it will benefit them really well, and it's not going to have any negative impacts on the drone's performance. And of course, you also have the fighters, which have very long optimal range, and the fighters work really well with the active mode of the implant because of the extra long range, and they simply, in most cases, have enough range to just hit everything when you warp at 0. In some occasions, you will have to turn off the implant so that your fighters actually reach the target. So that would be the difference between all of these different drone systems, or fighter systems. And of course, lightweight ships, which are something between a drone and fighter, but they also work the same way as fighters. They have extra range, so they also work really well with the Aerospace tactic implant. And as for the Rattlesnake here, well, as you can see, this thing has some decent DPS. Now, I would say, and I've noticed that the Nestor had much less problems with hitting ships, hitting smaller ships than the Rattlesnake. Now, I'm not really sure why that's the case. Maybe the Nestor just has a better bonus on drones, I don't know, but in any case, I've noticed that the Rattlesnake heavy drones seem to be, I mean, they perform really well, but when encountering fast targets, the Nestor seem to be performing a little bit better. Now, the Rattlesnake gets some very nice bonuses on the large drones. I mean, they have enough hit points to be compared with battlecruisers, and one single drone does as much DPS as ordinary 5 drones on other ships. So it's technically 10 drones crammed into 2 drones, and a bunch of battlecruisers crammed into 2 drones as well, hit points wise, which honestly makes the Rattlesnake a very, very good ship with the heavier equipment. Of course, it has its drawbacks. As mentioned, smaller lightweight ships are going to be problematic in most cases if you're not prepared. I mean, I used to kite Rattlesnakes with my Ortus all the time, and the Rattlesnake was one of my favorite battleship kills with the Ortus. Nowadays, I have a bunch of other ships that I use for the Rattlesnake. Primarily the Macarial, although the Macarial is slowly getting replaced with other ships, so that's also a thing I think that I'll have to record later on. I'm very curious to see how Super Carriers will perform. That's going to be fun. I actually cannot wait to see how much DPS I'll get on the mix. That's going to be hilarious, I think. Since if we follow the same number increase with this implant, if we follow the same percentage, I don't know. I mean, might very well have like half a million DPS on the mix, and if that's the case, that's scary. We will see. I mean, I don't know what's the thing going to be. It's not just raw numbers, of course. The Super Carriers will have a big problem with tracking, especially with the large, with the large fighters. They will be good against They will be really good against capitals, but the large fighters will definitely struggle against smaller targets, including battleships. So that's going to be fun to test out. Now the capacity performance on this ship is really good. I mean, I'm using the dual boosters, and I think a single booster would be enough with this build, but I simply don't trust the drones. I know that the drones are nasty, and I am going to be treating those drones with respect because they are dangerous. So don't keep your guard down against those drones in Cobalt Edge because they are dangerous. And dual boosters seem to be holding really well. As mentioned before in the start of the video, the Rattlesnake's capacitor is stable about 50% with only one booster, and this is even without any capacitor battery or any Nosferatu. So this ship's capacitor is really good, and one booster with this build should be more than enough to basically keep the tank up and running and to keep the ship's capacitor generally stable, although I would still recommend that you try to fit a capacitor battery or two inside, because some of the anomalies here in Cobalt Edge have a lot of neutralizers and Nosferatus. And I've noticed that they have a very big impact on your capacitor, especially the neutralizers. They seem to be drawing power from the ship in a very serious manner, so a capacitor battery is definitely recommended. For high sec and for ordinary content, you don't really have to have anything with any capacitor battery or on a Nosferatu. It's not really required, since the ship's capacitor is strong enough to maintain one booster without having any batteries or anything similar. The rigs also help with that a lot. I have the capacitor rigs, and they seem to be doing a very good job as well. Overall, the Rattlesnake is performing really well, and today I didn't find any exploration sites, surprisingly, but exploration sites in Cobalt Edge are worth it, definitely. They're definitely worth it. It is risky, for sure, but it is definitely worth it, and I think I'll just have to go with the Stratius next time. Yeah, that didn't end well for the first time, I know, but I'll definitely try to find a good Stratius build, to have a good Stratius build for Cobalt Edge. I mean, I already have a good one that I made like a month before the Wormholes have been released, so that was a very interesting moment there, but the Stratius might very well be the best ship for Cobalt Edge at the moment. Stratius or an Astor. Astro is good, but you will need to have a fourth medium slot in order to make it really good, since without a red scanner I'm not going in Cobalt Edge. Red scanner is your eyes and ears for players. The blue scanner is your way in and out of the wormhole and of the space. Two of these modules are basically a must-have if you are going in. If you are solo, that is, because you need to have a way in and way out. Now there was one guy that was stuck in Cold Edge with a Balgorn. They don't have a scanner. They didn't have a scanner. They didn't have anything basically. They found the wormhole. They went in, and I think they forgot to save the bookmark, and basically, yeah, they warped somewhere, and the wormhole collapsed. And that's how they got trapped inside. I have no idea if the guy is still trapped or not. I really hope that they somehow got out, but yeah. There was a Balgorn. That was actually a couple months ago. No, not months ago. A month ago or something. So yeah, if you see a Balgorn, that's probably the guy who got stuck inside. I actually wanted to go and try to find him to help him out, but didn't work out. Didn't really work out. Especially when, I mean, some of the regions have only one way in and one way out, and usually the Cold Edge region that has one way in and one way out is usually the most packed with loot and with all that good stuff. And I think they made that on purpose to make things a bit more interesting. And you can technically, I've heard that you can technically collapse the wormhole and settle in. Which is what a corporation actually did, I think. Although I'm not really sure when. But there is a citadel. There is a citadel on the north of Cobalt Edge, basically. Or actually, there is two of them. Yeah, I think there is two of them. I haven't been there. I have been to several different constellations, but I usually kept my profile low because, you know, it's dangerous to go there. I mean, if you go through a small wormhole, it's not a big deal, since small wormholes are safer, not safe, but safer. So yeah, the smaller ships are definitely the way to go with wormholes, honestly. Smaller ships just run much better, and overall are, I would say, much safer. If you have a cloaking, I mean, cloak and scanners are life in wormhole space, and I would say if you are preparing for actual wormhole space, then Cobalt Edge is a good practice. So yeah, if you are looking forward for the actual wormhole space, like I am, then I would say it is time to start practicing with Cobalt Edge, since the mechanics are nearly identical, and if you practice some time, you'll have a head start, basically, which is going to give you a important head up start compared to everyone else. I mean, you can technically live here quite comfortably, honestly. The ISK is nice, the loot is fantastic, the high risk, high reward, it's there, so definitely something that's interesting and something that is worth it. The start is absolutely rough. You kind of need to have a bunch of, let's say, friends, or you need to have a corporation interested in it, since alone you will be up against a lot of other players. You can do it alone, but it is much easier to just move in with a group, since it's going to give you an advantage over anyone else who is solo, and it's going to be much easier to start. Which is something that we plan to do when actual Wormhole Space is released. I mean, I don't know when that will happen. Hopefully very soon, but we have plans and we are mostly ready for it. Basically, just waiting for the update to be out, and then the move will happen. It will be fun, since you will be able to just jump in and out from one position to any position in the game, and I think that's, from one system you can basically jump anywhere, and the hole can open basically anywhere within the game. And well, that will be it for today. It was a very nice and relaxing little run with the Rattlesnake. Again, this thing is just performing really well. I love the Rattlesnake, it is a fantastic ship. And with that being said, if you guys want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.